Hello and good evening, enchanters and seductresses and everything in between. This is the first episode of a brand new series I am doing called Town Mall Goth. This will be an episodic series that will delve into various cultural turning points or pinpoints, whether it be TV shows, music albums, movies, video games that were keystones in my journey into the goth subculture. Without further ado, if you have not met me before, I am Ayla Belle. Welcome to Town Mall Goth, and welcome to my channel. I have long time made videos documenting my transition. I have since been kind of broadening my spectrum and what I talk about and share here on my YouTube channel. Now, this is a one-time disclaimer for all my trad goths out there. This is a long journey for me to get into the goth subculture. So if you're expecting me to start delving into Bauhaus, The Cure, Depeche Mode, Susie and the Banshees, that will be nearing the end. I'm kind of gonna try and work in a chronological order of elements, musicians that I came into discovery of slowly along the way. And let me tell you, it is like a decades-long process. Hence the term Small Town Mall Goth. I am not coming out here with any sort of pretension or overly serious notes. It's something that I'm excited and passionate about, so there might seem like a level of seriousness to some of what I talk about, but ultimately I do not take myself seriously in the slightest. So hopefully this series can be educational and inspiring for a lot of baby bats out there who are coming into their fangs, so to speak, and starting to whet their palate and expand a little more. To kind of get this party started a little bit, I was a moody and bizarre little child. Obviously, I'm sure we can tell that from some of what I've had to share in my transition documentation. There was naturally a level of alienation there. There was naturally a level of feeling different than the crowd. But that started to expand and be reflected in the art that I loved and appreciated. One of my absolute favorite songs growing up is Nina Gordon's Tonight and the Rest of My Life. And it is this beautiful, brooding pop song. Yes, it's pop music, but it is so moody, and like every time I hear it, I have this like fantastical vision of neon sunsets and purple brooding clouds and like a fallen angel, and literally, as the song talks about, like the axes of the world like strikes on fire and splits in twain. In no way is that song goth, but there are so many elements there where there's like this sort of religious upheaval, almost like a Revelations sort of moment going on there. And I think it's really like a questioning of oneself and trying to find oneself. Another beautiful song was Black Black Heart by David Usher, and that's another just sultry, dark, mysterious pop song. And I think the 90s was a really beautiful moment for a lot of that. And growing up in that moment and time and being a kid, loving a lot of that music, these were definitely gateways in a lot of way into moodier music, moodier art and culture. It wasn't until I was in about grade 7 or 8 that things really started taking a turn in my life in a number of ways. Really quickly, without going too much into what was going on in my life at the time, but I was extremely depressed, and for the first time I was contemplating the extent of how I was wishing to engage with life. With that being said, I did start taking on a lot more dark music. A big one for me was 3 Days Grace. I remember hearing that song, I Hate Everything About You, and it became very anthemic for me at the time. I played it constantly. I will beat a song to death. I will listen to it on repeat for multiple days, potentially weeks, over and over. It creates a lot of havoc on my Spotify Wrapped when that comes around every year, but Yes, I remember my mom having a lot of difficulty with me listening to that song so profusely, as well as screaming it at the top of my lungs. That album as a whole was just such like a call to arms to really sit in your anger and accept it. Now, also kind of switching gears and like less severely angry, but a little more playful on some darker themes. I was introduced by a crush to an album called Does This Look Infected by local Canadian band Sum 41. There's a small weird connecting piece there for me where my French teacher in grade school was actually related to other Canadian one-hit wonder Len, who did the popular song Don't Steal My Sunshine. Len actually discovered Sum 41. There's a whole story to get into there with Len and the amount of money that they put into making that video and the divides it drew for them with the record label. Ultimately, Len stepped away from making music and went more into the production side of things. And that's where he discovered Sum 41 and really gave them their legs. So, small world kind of thing there, but also this is the beauty of Canadian art and music, is that there's so much funding from Canada to help give these artists some legs to some degree. And yes, I discovered Sum 41's Does This Look Infected. Honestly, the music was so good. I remember the Hell song was completely done in this like very intro level way where they're like playing around with action figures. But at the same time, the music talks about like politics and stuff like that. So I did get some legs in punk music and starting to understand and develop my mind scope about how do I feel about politics, how do I absorb this, and what do I think about it, as well as I'm also digging into music that's helping me explore my emotional side a bit more. And of course, yes, it was very intense at that time. Also in and around all of this was The Disturbed. In grade 6, so shortly before this whirlwind going on in my world, I was learning electric guitar, and my teacher had introduced me to the likes of AC/DC, Metallica, and Ozzy Osbourne. So there were also some elements there where I was discovering darker, heavier music than I may have been exposed to growing up. I mean, my parents listened to Simon and Garfunkel and Fleetwood Mac, so there really was no level of heavy rock in my world, except for whatever came on the radio very randomly. Ultimately, all of these things started to mesh together and just open my eyes up to that there is a world beyond mainstream. There is a world out there where people are a bit edgy, are a little bit different, present themselves in eccentric ways, whether it's through Liberty spikes, collared necklaces, chains, black nail polish. I even have a memory of a friend in grade school talking about goths and how he thought that he was going to become a goth once we moved into high school. And I was like, what are you even talking about? And he was like, come on, have you like never even heard of Marilyn Manson? And at that point I hadn't. The internet was also still very new, so and I was young, I didn't really dig into it. That is also a part of the magic of what my youth was like, is that the internet was still a very new thing. Now, a lot of kids by the end of grade 8 were probably starting to dig into things like MSN and spend a lot more time on the internet. But in my family, that just didn't happen. We were still working with like dial-up, I believe, so anytime we were jumping on the internet, we were cutting off the family's access to the outside world otherwise. Now lastly, and kind of like the main feature of today's episode, is the Osbournes. And honestly, the Osbournes was a remarkable show. If I recall correctly, and this might be a very inaccurate reporter's hat, so take it with a grain of salt, but if I recall correctly, the Osbournes was actually the first ever reality TV show. Obviously, you have old school films or TV programs like Archie Bunker and Friends, Seinfeld, what have you, that try to give you a view and scope of what people's like menial lives look like. But that's all scripted, and these are made for the purpose of comedy or what have you. The Osbournes was the first TV show that said, we're gonna take real people's real lives and show this. And who are we gonna do it to of all people? Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness. Now, this comes from the absolute mega mind that is Sharon Osbourne. That woman is incredible, and she has really gilded that family. And she was like the first Kris Jenner. She really knew how to helm that family and helm Ozzy's worth and value and really carry it in a way that could do something for that family. And the Osbournes was so cool. I remember sitting down with my family and getting to watch it together. I think at first, if I recall correctly, my parents were pretty apprehensive. We grew up in a fairly conservative family that really didn't make too many slips. We had to be very presentable. We used to go to church all the time. Watching the Osbournes was a really interesting moment to share as a family, and it helped normalize some really eccentric ways of life. It helped also normalize someone that could have otherwise been seen as very scary. I mean, Ozzy Osbourne was touted and put through the media for having bit off the head of a bat, so he seemed a bit psychotic. But having him shown in this really human way, I remember vividly kind of watching the Osbournes through my dad's eyes and him realizing, oh, he's just like anyone else. He deals with a lot of the same things. Troubles with television remotes, troubles with advancing technology, dogs using facilities inside the house, and dealing with kids that you're starting to lose a grasp of as they enter through their teen years. So that was a really beautiful and awesome experience getting to share that with my family. And it really changed television in a huge way for years to come. Obviously, it didn't really do anything for goth culture, but it was something important to see kind of otherwise mysterious, scary looking figure to the mainstream world and humanize them in a real powerful way. Ultimately, a big thing that show also did for me specifically was I found a level of relatability in Kelly and Jack. It was kind of funny to see, here's the Prince of Darkness raising their kids, and yet they're just like any other good parent, strict about curfews and the kind of antics and troubles that they get into. You're not allowed to get a tattoo or a piercing, and these were a lot of things that I was starting to feel as a kid, is that here I am, I'm wanting to deviate and push my limits and boundaries a bit, and my parents too seem to be coming down on me like a pile of bricks. So it helped me feel relatable on some levels, and again, just further introduce me to that there are alternative lives outside of what you typically see. Now, I do hope that these videos will be quite episodic and dig in a little more into single elements. The next video is going to be about Evanescence's Fallen, and I have some beautiful memories and recollections and specific pinpoint moments of what that album meant for me as I was continuing to dig into darker art and culture. But ultimately, sorry for any injustice that I've done to the Osbournes here for cutting them a bit short, but it was really just the most minute introduction into alternative cultures. Fallen, I have a little deeper connections with, and hopefully I can do a little better of a job putting on my reporter hat, digging into what that moment also meant in history for that band and for the music scene. Until next time, thank you so much for digging in with me to this little taste test of the goth subculture, or small town mall goth. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of these. Maybe I'll make a bit of a play on my old sign off, but until next time, keep your canines sharp and your minds sharper. Ciao.